Hey YouTube. So I'm coming back to normality here. I've had a little bit of craziness. I was out a couple of weeks or a week ago and came home, and my house had been burgled, robbed of quite a few things, which was pretty challenging, I guess. But the main thing was just like the sense of invasion, right? Just of like weirdness of somebody going through your stuff. But it looks like we're back to normal pretty much. New locks on the door, and there it is. But it was pretty weird vibe. I think what I'm talking about today is I'm talking about the what do they call this? The perception of divine technology. The perception of divine technology, which sounds silly, and it's easy not to think about it or not to see it. As we get caught up in the mists of time and not see the reality of and not see the nature of reality, dude. Not see the nature of reality, right? So it's I think it takes a little bit of practice. It takes a little bit of practice to see the nature of reality and certain aspects of it. So, like, I've been going through this thing for a while now about the Shiva and Shakti thing, right? The Shiva and the Shakti. And the thing is that, like, to see one, you almost need to see the other. And then they're actually the same thing. So it doesn't make any sense whatsoever, right? So it doesn't make any sense. But it seems pretty common. Like, I know I've talked about this before in some of my earlier videos. Like, I think in one of my first videos, I was talking about like the demonic visions, right? And the weird thing about not just demonic visions, but any visions, even DMT visions or ayahuasca visions or whatever, is that they're incredibly real, right? You often hear people mention that it's more real than reality itself, right? Those visions were more real. This isn't a real place, right? Those visions were more real. And that's not actually true. Like when you actually see reality as it is, it's got the same sense of reality. It's like this high definition visionary aspect, which isn't typical. It's not typical in normal life. I just got a project that I'm doing for Google, right? It's for an agency in San Francisco, but I'm doing this project for Google. And like a lot, I don't know if you've seen this, but like at Starbucks here in Chile, they've got like they don't use menus anymore. They've got these high def screens with all the menu items, right? So it can be animated. If you look at the animation, it's incredibly crisp. Everything's really crisp, right? There's this crispness. And that crispness comes from a couple of things. One is the resolution, which is usually 4K. And the other thing is the frame rate, which is 60 frames per second, more or less, which is an interesting quality of frames per second because traditional film is 24 frames per second. Back in the day, if you were doing web animation, you might do 10 frames a second, right? Just because it's less costly, like on the and actually I remember doing like mobile games back in the late 90s, and it was like way less frame rates than that, just to try and sort of give an idea. Like the GIF animations, remember the GIFs, right? I guess those are popular again, but that'll be like very small amount of frames animated. So it's not really realistic. So if you crank up the frame rate and you crank up the pixel information, you get this incredible crispness, right? So that kind of frame rate and that crispness is is kind of what's perceived like during like well, during like a visionary experience. You get this sort of this crispness. So does that mean the frame rate has been increased? Now, that's interesting because like the frame rate is literally frames per second. It's actually a time. It's actually a time quotient, right? It's actually it's relative to time. And of course, as you get closer to reality, time disintegrates. So it's almost like the frame rate increases, I guess, in a way, right? But what's funny about that is that what people tend to talk about and what I've spoken about is like during visionary experiences, it's like it's more real than reality. And like that's not really true. It's more real than how we perceive reality normally. But as you move into like as you move into like the true self, the reality has that experience too. It's got this incredible crispness, just regular reality, right? It's got this the regular, normal, everyday reality that you might think of has uh, starts exhibiting extreme crispness. Crispness. There's a lot of different like metaphors you could do with like movies and the emergence of digital technology and how that like that gets closer to the crispness of actual reality. But this is why is this? Why is there the why is it this? Why is there this perceptual difference? So the perceptual difference is actually coming from the I guess you could call it the ego structure or thought structures which form the ego. There's a style of meditation. There's various styles of meditation, but there was one in particular which it's not even a style of meditation. It's just a style of perception. Because I think one of the things with meditation is it's kind of like it's like a formal modality of being. And one of the things that I really like about I've spoken about Muji a couple of times. One of the things I like about Muji is that he tends to sort of call people to perceive direct reality, but almost in a sort of non-meditative state, just sort of in a regular frame of mind, and just becoming aware of what is actually happening with the thought structures. So one of the things that I've been doing over the last year or so is at one point I was calling it like the dangerous kriya, which is the movement of energy from the third eye through the from the third eye to the pituitary to the hypothalamus to the thalamus to the pineal gland, then back around over the top of the head to the crown chakra, and then back to the third eye, and you sort of create this cycle of energy, which I think for some people that won't do much, but it's got this really crazily amazing sensation, which is stunning, but it's not the same as the direct perception of reality. And I mean, basically what Muji's preaching is he's preaching like the perception of the true self or of Shiva, right? So it's the perception of Shiva, which is quite distinct like when you're doing something like the dangerous kriya and moving energy around this cycle, that's it's quite a thought intensive process, right? Because you're focusing on specific objects, right? You're focusing on the object, an imagined object of light, and then you're focusing on objects which exist, but they're sort of like, I think you would call these like imaginal, because they do exist, but you have to use your imagination to perceive them. So like the pituitary gland, you can't see it, and you sort of have to imagine where it exists. And of course, what happens is as you do this, you start feeling it, and you start to perceive the structures of these organs through the imaginal field, right? And it feels really realistic. And what happens is as you move into this state of, I mean, it really becomes sort of ecstatic. But as you do this, you start moving from strangely, you start moving from wow. It's funny because I was coming on here to talk about something, but as I'm discussing this, it's like it's giving me a different perspective on this. So as you're moving the energy through this, you actually move into the sort of astral, you move into the astral plane more or less, right? And as you do that, as you move into the astral plane, it also it has this incredible reality to it. It has a high definition field. But that's very different. Maybe not very different, but it's different in quality than the perception of reality itself. So for a while, I don't think I've talked about this on YouTube, but for a while, I was talking about the direct perception of reality, like to myself. I was talking about it as the well. I was talking about the direct perception of reality as the well. And the well is kind of the place, which is kind of like, I mean, a well is kind of like a place you can't really see inside of, right? But which has like the waters of life inside or something like that, right? And so I was thinking about this sort of, it's almost like a void space, which it's almost the void space from which reality emanates from. Now, at one point, I had located this like sort of behind my eyes, this sort of well of the emission of reality. The well of the emission of reality. And there was this emanation. But of course, what's what what's true of the well, however, is it's not actually behind the eyes, right? I mean, you could say it certainly can be, but it's actually at any point of focus. So, like for example, if I focus on a coin, right? I've got a coin here which I can focus on. Um, Now, what happens is when you focus on an object, is that what you tend to focus on is you're actually focusing on all the it's like a woven fabric of thought structures. So we don't actually directly perceive the object. It just doesn't happen. So it's almost like, you know what it's like? It's almost like you've got a camera and you've got a big lens on the camera, like a big, like, I don't know, like a lens with like a couple of like filters on the camera. And that's how you're looking at it. And the direct perception of reality would be taking the lens off and just allowing the sensor allowing the sensor just to grab the material, right? To grab the material, the raw light data. Um, but what happens is that we're so accustomed to the filters that we think that is reality. I mean, I guess this is good, some kind of analogy in like Instagram or something, right? I was looking at a picture. I you see, I love filters, like, as I work in visual effects and stuff, and like using filters is like it's this beautiful thing. And so I remember like a couple of years ago, I was on vacation, and the girl I was with was taking photographs, and she's like, no filters, just raw reality, complete. And like I was taking these pictures using the HDR and like changing the light structures and augmenting and really playing with the filters, raw versus filter. And like one of them is this beautiful construct which sort of co-opts the imagination, exaggerates certain aspects, creates higher contrasts, right? And the other one just presents things as they are without interpretation. And so the what happens is we grow to like the filter, right? The filter is really it looks sexy. That's what we say. That's what you say in visual effects. Like make it look sexy, right? Can you make this look sexier? Can you give it a higher frame rate? Can we increase the resolution? Can we give it more motion blur? What can we do to make this look better, right? Can we add a lens flare, augment the lights? And so the ego is kind of like having Photoshop. It's kind of like a Photoshop over reality. It's trying to interpret the raw data that's coming in. Now, as you know, a lot of people like to go on about ego death and how the ego is bad and stuff, but what? And even listening to Muji's like this too. He goes on about this, like it's not real. The most important thing you can do is throw away the ego because it's not your friend. Yeah, I mean, I guess there's something to be said about that because it's like because the direct perception of Shiva at any point is really it's really liberating. Now, the funny thing is like as you're listening to me talk about this, you might be thinking, God, here he goes again, or dude, you know what you're talking about, or whatever, because that's what we tend to do. But if you can just for one brief moment, like hold it's like Moses at the Red Sea. If you can just pull the waters aside, if you can part the waters of the thought structures, right? And just sit in that particular moment. And the funny thing is you only have to do it for a brief moment. Is just stop the chatter. And of course, like how this is usually taught is like you only have to do it a couple of times. And even Vigandals, you only have to do this and then just keep trying to do it. Just keep parting the waters, right? Parting the waters and allowing that. And what happens is because like if you try and sit down in a meditative state and do this at first, it's quite difficult at first. Um, but if you just do it in the normal course of the day, just for a brief moment, because it's quite easy to do it for a brief moment, right? And then you just keep trying to do it, and you keep pulling back to this space where the waters are parted. That's a pretty good metaphor. That the waters, way to go, Bible, parting of the waters, right? Now, one of the interesting benefits of this is that space which is created is really powerful. So, for example, in Franz Bardon's books, or not Franz Bardon, but any magic book, one of the things they always tell you is that, like, for example, if you're going to evoke a spirit or a demon or whatever you're going to do, if you're going to do that, that you have to know that you are divinity. You are the sort of prime mover of reality. And once you're in that space, then you have complete control. So there's lots of funny examples of people doing this, like on YouTube, right? And not so funny examples of people like going through ritual magic and trying to be divinity. But it's actually true. It's actually true. I'm not sure how true it is. The thing is, I think it's easy to talk about this, and it's easy to come up with a sort of conceptual idea. It's easy to come up with a conceptual idea of what that might look like, right? So the problem is that thought structures can create a very compelling vision of how that might look, and so you focus on that. So you're actually focusing on an artfully prepared thought structure, which appears like it's like you're God or something, right? You might see yourself with rays of light coming out, right? As if you've been photoshopped. But that's not actually what it is. But my experience with this personally is yes. Like, one of the things that I've spoken about in this channel quite a bit is the evocation of spirits, right? And generally, just the evocation of divinities and this kind of thing. But from time to time, you do get evocations of negative spirits. Hello, what's up? You do get these evocations of negative spirits. But what happens is like, the funny thing is if you have an evil spirit, right? If an evil spirit comes out during meditation, for example, right? You have an evil spirit come out. If you like, one of the things people tend to do is, and this was my first experience with, like, my first accidental demonic evocation, is somebody brought me a cross and a Bible, and I'm like, it's not working, right? It doesn't work. However, if you move into the space, what I was previously calling the well, and you just sit in that space, it literally is. The thing is, that space is the space from whence all reality emanates, right? So it's like you're not really pretending to identify as divinity. You're just in the space of the true self, right? And I'm going to say that you can take the evilest spirit that you could imagine, and there's some really evil ones. If you can occupy that space, that really literally nothing can touch you from that space. Now, that space can be and has been personified, or, like, as people, you try and describe it, right? You say, well, and it, like people don't really understand what that means, or like you say it's the space of no thinking or the void, and it doesn't really mean much to people, So I think over the years it's been personified, like, so, like, for example, um I just gotta I'm just looking at the comments here, and JLo is saying that you need to talk in tongues to command spirits. Yeah. Maybe, I don't think that's true, but I wouldn't bother wasting my time doing that personally. But personally, I don't want to command spirits. I'm not interested in doing that really, like as a practice. But I think all you have to really do is just get into the correct space of consciousness, and basically they just disintegrate from that space. One of the things I was going to say is that space, that well, has been personified. Um, Clearly, Christians personify that space as Christ, which I think is, yeah. I mean, the whole image of Christ has been is problematic. I think, right? It's a problematic image in many ways, but it does seem to be at its well. It's difficult. A lot of Christians will tell you that's not true. So that's why it's problematic. A lot of Christians will tell you it's not the space of no thought. It's the living Christ, right? So they can't even go there with you, right? Because they've got their own overlay. They've got their own overlay of of reality, right? Um, yeah. The direct perception of true reality is better than any object. It's not better. It's not better than any object structure. But what it does do is it creates a type of backlight, right? It creates like a light table from from whence we can actually look at the negative images. Like if it was photography, we're looking at the negatives of reality. And I'm using the word whence a lot, from whence we can start perceiving the essence of divine technology. Getting back to the title of the video, finally, the essence of divine technology. So this is one of the funny things is that, you know, one of the things Muji was saying was he was saying that the thoughts themselves weigh more than mountains, which seems like it doesn't seem like a phrase that we can relate to that much, right? What do you mean thoughts weigh more than mountains? And part of the reason we might say, what do you mean? Just reading Vegan Doll's comments here. But where was I? I was talking about the divine technology, the perception of divine technology, and the weight, the mountain, right? The weight of the mountain. And part of the what happens with that is that it's difficult to understand what he's talking about because we tend not to be, we're not fluent. We're not fluent in we are not fluent in consciousness. Um, and so consciousness I've talked about this for years. So like consciousness does have specific viscosities, right? People call them vibrations. I like to call them viscosities. And Muji here is talking about them as like the weights. So the specific mobility, right? It's like mobility. Actually, what's that other word? Hold on a second. Let me see if that's a good word. Oh yeah, there is another good word I can throw in there. The motility, right? That's great. I can now talk about the viscosity and motility of consciousness. Um, I'm not. I probably do know what vegan dolls, but I don't know off the top of my head. Um, so like consciousness itself, and I'm speaking about the thought structures, the Shakti aspect of reality has a specific viscosity. And that's what Muji's talking about here with the weights of consciousness. And the conscious structures too, they also have dynamic charges of electricity and magnetism in them. And so, and it's almost like we're dealing with the finest filament of ineffable consciousness. But like as you become more accustomed to perceive it, you start being able to see, like, thought structures move over each other. They have friction between them. They have friction, right? And you can perceive this. And so I think one of the things to do is well, not one of the things to do. One of the things that happens is as we as we become more aware of reality itself, we start becoming more aware of this viscosity and motility of the structure of Shakti itself, right? And I'm not aware, like, I don't know the Talos and Christopher vegan dolls, like, off the top of my head. However, I do know one thing about any tale or any narrative. I mean, a narrative. I mean, what is a narrative? A, a narrative is an energetic. Oh, that's a good one. Okay. But it's like an energy. It's an energy structure. A narrative is literally an energy structure which develops, right? Doesn't even matter what it is, but it's like it's got an energy structure, and it's that energy structure supports or is the scaffolding of a bunch of objects, right? It's ridiculous. It's ridiculous. Um, yeah, the thing is like lots of people use different languages to describe this process. So I'm here looking at the comments, and Jason Lowe's here saying the spiritual eyes need to be reborn in the spirit, not in the flesh. And so that's probably just a different way of saying what I'm saying here, um, through the lens of the Christian narrative, right? I think the Christian narrative is really useful. I don't think it's the purest narrative. Well, it's actually I suppose what I'm talking about is the narrative of consciousness, right? So it's a slightly different perspective on it, which is less narrative-y and more focused on like dynamic structures and sort of the perception of the dynamic structures of awareness itself, right? Which clearly is not for everybody because it's hard to explain what the hell I'm talking about. And I think like you only tend to see people like high level Buddhist meditators kind of understand. I don't know though. Even then, even like high level Buddhist meditators, like it's the thing is like the viscosity and the motility of awareness is really guided by the elemental structure of consciousness, right? So the way and the elemental structure consciousness ties directly into the weight of the world, right? That the weight of the world, the weight of consciousness has weight, right? It has weights. But we're talking about incredibly ineffable weights. It's almost like it's like trying to measure the atomic weight of an element. I mean, that's what consciousness is like. You're trying to um, you're trying to perceive the difference between like helium and hydrogen at the atomic weight level. I mean, that's where the perception goes to when you're perceiving pure consciousness, right? When you're perceiving pure consciousness, you become aware of these specific densities or atomic weights of different structures of consciousness. And of course, as you drift down into the physical plane, those are sort of transmogrified into more interesting structure. Well, the funny thing is it's common to say that as consciousness moves down to the physical plane, it becomes transmogrified into physical reality. Therefore, it's of a lower vibration. But I'm not sure that's actually true. I think what actually happens is our awareness becomes transmogrified, right? Our awareness becomes transmogrified. Physical reality is the same, it's at the same high vibrational spiritual level as it's always been. What's happened is our awareness has become transmogrified, right? Our ability to perceive. It's like, oh wow, this is. I mean, how I used to walk around thinking the world was boring, right? I'd be like, dude, this is life is boring. Like, okay, I'm going to go to work. I'm going to do this. This is really boring, right? And what happens is like, and you see this like in like Eckhart Tolle in his books, is that as you start perceiving reality directly, you suddenly realize, wait a minute, it's not boring at all. I just haven't perceived it correctly, right? It's like I've wait, it's not you, it's me, right? It's not physical reality. Is it boring? My perception is completely filtered, right? There's this thick Coke bottle, literally Coke bottle glasses on, right? Beer goggles. Yeah, exactly, J Lo. We're manifesting a reality through thought structures, basically words we say in our heads. Now, some Christians will call that the what they call that? The enemy, right? It's the enemy, right? But the enemy, here's the thing is that enemy is part of divine technology, right? That thought structure, that overlay is also part of divine technology. And so this is like a really liberating place to be, is that as you watch the perception of pure reality as promoted by somebody like Muji is really, really good. And Muji will tell you, don't even waste your time perceiving the thought structures, right? As many Christians will say, just focus on the Christ, right? It's basically a Muji lesson, right? Um, there's a lot to be said for that. But the Shakti aspect, which some people like to call it satanic, but it's not just satanic because lots of beauty comes through Shakti too, right? Your kids, your there's all this other stuff that emerges, which is beautiful. But so I've kind of got this middle position where I think it's kind of like becoming aware of the coastline, becoming aware of the coastline between Shakti and Shiva, and watching the waves, becoming aware that the lapping of waves on the shore is a divine technology. Because, dude, if you watch, if you sit and observe what happens, dude, if you sit and your thoughts are just as they do, like you're be sitting here and your thoughts are rolling, dun, 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 right? And it's just your thoughts are rolling, and you're just in common reality, right? That's what I'm kind of doing right now. Thoughts are coming to me. I'm expositing based on this sort of on the ideas which are coming through. But if you actually sit and observe the structures, then you move into the space of the well. What's the word I like to use? The pendulation. So you pendulate between this perception of pure reality and then go back and watch the thought structures. And because they've got this perceptual backdrop of truth, what it is you can only describe it as divine technology. The technology behind it is so advanced. It's so fucking advanced that it's unbelievable. It's technology, right? It's a consciousness is a technology, people. And the technology, it's so mind-bogglingly advanced. Now, what happens is, now at the moment I'm in a sort of normal state of consciousness right now, but from time to time I'll move into a really like Kundalini-esque advanced state of consciousness where I can perceive stuff. And usually it's not like, sometimes it happens through meditation. It happened the other night. I was just lying in bed and take care, Jay. Yeah, good to see you. From time to time, I can move into a state of like ridiculously advanced perception, I guess, you know. And it's just the Kundalini, I guess, you know. So I think I was saying this the other night. I was in this state the other night. I'd just gone to bed. I'd been running around all day, hadn't meditated or anything. And I just go to bed, I lie down, and I'm just, and I just start seeing stuff. And when I say I'm seeing stuff, it's not like in physical reality, it's perceptual awareness. You become aware. Sometimes it's visual. I mean, it is visual in a way because it's like, but it's not like, yeah, it's like third eye reality, I guess, right? But you become aware of the, at least the structure of like, of the sheath of the human sheath, let's call it that. And so the possible realities for a human are infinite. I mean, you often hear people like Tony Robbins talking about this, you know, just believe in what you want to do and you can become that. But that actually is true to an extreme level. there are astral containers. There are sort of like astral potentialities. There are potentialities which surround us, which defy anything we could imagine, right? Including sci-fi-esque. I'm saying sci-fi-esque, but you could say like one container might be you become a guru. Another container might be you in 1,000 years. Another container might be just something else. There's all these sort of astral constructs which are available to occupy the awareness. Now, none of what's funny about this is like in the backlight of pure Shiva awareness, none of this stuff is real, right? None of it's real. But in the context of the high-tech emanation of Shakti technology, of which the human sheath is one of them, and it's one in which the awareness has settled. I mean, clearly we're surrounded by a world which seems pretty settled and organized in its own way because of the particular focus of our awareness at this moment in time. But that is completely changeable. I mean, I guess this is sort of getting into Doctor Strange territory. You know, it's really just like a matter of like how you perceive reality. It's the direction of your it's really quite complex, you know. It's funny because if you listen to like somebody like Muji, who I consider like a really good teacher, you know, he's such a good teacher about Shiva awareness. It's very simple, and that's one of the nice things about the Shiva awareness, right? It's so simple. So there's a lot of positive aspects to that, right? Um, but and obviously the thing with the Shakti aspect is it gets into crazy territories really quickly, right? It's easy to start talking about chakras and channeling energy into your finger or various other things you might want to do, you know? Um, and the the problem with that is it's incredibly complex, right? It's an incredibly complex structure, which is difficult to communicate. And what it also does is it creates lots of parallel paths, which all seem like they're valid. That's why you get Muslims with their incredibly valid cultural, how old, hundreds of years old system, and the Christianity and all these parallel systems. Now, the lesson of Kundalini is that all of those systems are valid. And this is where the human mind can't really deal with it, because how can that be true, Because we're sort of, the human mind is being trained in this sort of simplified perceptual awareness of what reality actually is. And the problem, I think, is, what's funny about the ego is it's way weaker. It's way weaker than we think it is. Like, we tend to think of the ego as a very, because it's like what we identify as ourselves, and we think of it as, I'm a sovereign being. I'm incredibly sovereign and powerful and whatever. And it's just not like that. That's why it's so easy to hypnotize people and take control of people and whatever. I was watching a video, and in the video, it was somebody, they were trying to, or they were trying to come up with this way of fooling the mind. Like, how can you not remember something? And and all they did was they came up with a pattern, and they just substituted. It was just like a simple pattern substitution, and you forget something which just happened immediately before. So by simple pattern substitutions, this is one of the things they do in like neurolinguistic programming. Like, you can use simple pattern substitutions and actually confuse people. It's one of the things hypnotists do. Hypnotists can use language. If they're good hypnotists, they can manipulate language and create pauses, and during the pauses and dynamic switches in language, they can focus the mind in ways it wasn't aware that it was being focused. So the mind, as we perceive it, is actually, it's not a very powerful structure. It's really, really easy to take control of it. I mean, it's really quite sad when you see people often talking about their sovereignty is really not a strong structure at all. Very easy to deceive and manipulate. I should made some notes here. Let me see if I'm covering all the stuff I was wanting to talk about here. Talked about the emission point, the filterless perception of reality, the weight of the consciousness. I think I tend to talk about the same things over and over again, right? Which I think is fine. Like, if you ever listened to Muji, he just talks about the same thing over and over again too. I think my general dialogue tends to be about the elemental structure of consciousness and the perception of, what do they call this video? The perception of divine technology in all things, right? Here's the thing, though. I mean, the funny thing is like, Muji, for example, talks about just holding your consciousness in a place of, I mean, his thing is like this. It's like the place where there's no thoughts, right? And just hold, even if it's just for a moment, holding your awareness there. Now, one of the things that Nisargadatta talked about is holding your awareness, even for a moment, just in regular life, not in a meditative state, and then releasing it, but then coming back to it and coming back to it. And what eventually happens is that aperture expands, it dilates, right? And it becomes the dilation allows divinity, or allows the Shiva awareness to flow into the ego structure. But what I'm talking about in terms of the perception of divine technology and the awareness of elements also allows the same process to occur. It depends how you do it, though, because, for example, it's very common for people to perceive the elements. It's not common for people to perceive the elements. It's common for people to talk about the elements and not perceive them, right? But to really perceive them is it's astonishing. It's the most astonishing thing. What usually happens is people are playing with the elements, but they're doing it from the ego perspective. So they're trying to manipulate the elements to make something happen, right? They're trying to do some kind of magical output, right? And that's, in a way, magic is the ultimate expression of the ego, right? It's just the ultimate expression of the egoic mind. And like the acceptance of it as divinity, the acceptance of divine technology, even at the ego level, right? The perception of the elemental structure of divine consciousness, right? Of the Shakti awareness is analogous to the perception of pure awareness at the Shiva level. Although there's a slight the thing is I'm just sitting there right now, and as you sit, dude, my third eye is just turned. It's just vibrating right now. Rump, rump, rump. And so, what you can, I mean, at the end of the day, you can't really say much about it other than just sit in the energy. The perception of the divinity is enough. It's like you don't really talking about it is a waste of time. It's funny because like some people do Shaktipat. They do a transmission of energy, right? And some people do it and they talk a lot, right? And you don't have to talk because talking is like it's an inferior structure of consciousness. The best way of transmission is through the it's just through transmission. No talk needed, right? It's just through the transmission of pure divinity. You don't have to there's a place for mantras. I love mantras, right? Mantras have a particular way of guiding the mind into the refined states of consciousness. But once you're in the particular it's like I'm just trying to like it's funny. It's like there's just this awareness of the you guys, it's the divine perception. It's crazy. in a way, like I was saying in that last video, it's like there's an ASMR quality to it. It's like there's this ASMR sort of vibe where it's almost like you can almost, it's not almost, you can cultivate energy just using your fingers, right? You can cultivate. It's just crazy, dude. It's crazy. And this is just like a Shakti thing going on here, right? It's just like it's the ineffable energy of Shakti, right? Got to pull myself out of this. I'm going to the zone here, guys. This is like what happens is if you get into the state, you can go into these like what do they call it, Sartori, or what do they call that? A deep meditative state just based on that, because the perception the perception of the vibratory qualities of consciousness, it's like every little microscopic molecular aspect of consciousness becomes like it becomes the well, it becomes it it just pulls you into the transcendent. There's a word I'm looking for here. What is it? Is this transcend? Oh my God, I feel so good right now. Holy shit. This is the best thing. Like when you're meditating and this comes up on you and you're just vibrating divinity. Wow. I know it doesn't look like much, it's just like this unbelievable. And it's funny because the vibration started here, right? And now it's down like in my root chakra. And it's just this, wow, man. Oh my goodness. Right? Hell, I can't even talk. It's just crazy. Now, sometimes if I'm meditating and this starts going, this might be when you might invoke divinity, so you might like you do a mantra or something, right? So one of the mantras I've been using recently, which is something my tantra teacher gave me, actually Tomer, he's not really my tantra teacher, but he's been teaching me tantra when he gets a chance. So he gave me this mantra last year, which is Hom Rim Agratara Nama, Hom Rim Agratara Nama, Hom Rim Agatara Nama. It's an abundance mantra. Hom Rim Agatara Nama. It's a mantra to the goddess Tara. Hom Rim Agatara Nama. Hom Rim Agatara Nama. And then what happens? It's not happening now because my consciousness is split with the screen here. And actually, it's funny because now that I'm doing that, the energy is subsiding. But in a meditative state, when you do that, it augments it. It augments the energy, and it becomes highly focused and compressed, which often results in an evocation. But none of that's even important. I was just thinking there, like just sharing that mantra as that energy is coming up. Maybe it will create abundance for you. It created abundance for me. It's really crazy, that mantra. It was crazy how that worked. Like I literally the best financial year of my life last year, just from using that mantra for a month in a semi-casual way, just during meditation every morning. And then, oh my God, it feels so good, dude. This is why I've been doing videos for all these years, is that sensation, which I just expressed a few minutes ago, where it's like you can't even speak. It's like you don't want it to go away, right? It's like, come back, right? Because there's emergence. Now, this is one of the things, like somebody well, no, because the thing is when it's the direct perception. What happens is the direct perception of Shiva, of pure awareness, seems like it's contradictory to Kundalini. But the only way you can directly perceive Shiva is when Kundalini, is when Shakti releases the opens the doors. So there's like an interplay between these two forces to allow the what's the name of this video? To allow the perception of divine technology, right? So there's something about the perception of divine technology which creates bliss. It creates unbelievable bliss at a physical level, right? Which is far beyond anything that you can experience in other ways. Now, when I started experiencing this like 5 or 6 years ago, the energy seemed very sexual at the time, and that's true. But I think that was probably like that is what it is. But it was kind of an unskilled, it's not unskilled, but it's like because you have to learn how to work with that too. But over time, there's lots of different vibrations of that energy you can pull through. One of the ones that Ram Dass always talked about was loving awareness, like loving kindness, loving awareness. And he used that as a mantra, just loving awareness. I am loving awareness, or I am loving kindness, right? Now, if you get into that perception of pure reality, and then you use that as a mantra, that also, I mean, you can evoke like a divinity, but also the evocation of divine kindness, right? Or loving, that is incredibly powerful. And what happens is as you focus your awareness and loving awareness, you could identify that as an object, right? So it's not the direct perception of Shiva. This is an emanation filtered through Shakti. So it's an emanation of Shiva being filtered. It's like the direct perception of, it's like the first emanation. It's like one of the first emanations of Shakti from Shiva, right? And so you can allow your awareness just to filter around the concept of loving awareness. And dude, it radiates unbelievable. It's not it, but and at that stage, it's not even ecstasy anymore. It's something else. You can only really come to terms with it in terms of like divinity. Like it's this divine emanation of like pure love, right? It's just unbelievable. And that's why I'm saying like the perception, my previous perception of it all being desire in some ways seems unskilled, because that's almost like it's not lower vibration. It might be lower vibration, but it's almost like it's just being aware of like the most obvious physical aspect of it, right? So it's almost like an earthbound perception of divinity, right? And then as you move into these higher states, you get this higher perception of this ray of divine love. And the funny thing about the divine love is it's not even what we consider love anymore. It's this other, it's way deeper than anything we can perceive of as love. It's just so deep. It's like a profound ocean of depth, which just emanates out. This is really funny, you know. I should do more videos like this. This is funny because you start a video off and you're using the mind because you're talking. It's logical. But if there's a gift, it's the direct perception of energy flow. And this may appear really stupid on video. I don't know, but this is real. This flow of energy just it's unbelievable. I haven't put my hand down in like 30 minutes, right? What does that even mean? Okay. Been acting a little foolish here for about 15 minutes or so, right? So I guess I don't want to end the video. I just want to keep like channeling. This feels so good, channeling energy, right? Oh my God. reality, the direct perception of reality of that client, right? So it's funny, like sometimes when I sit down at night before I go to bed, I'll have these visions. And, a lot of times visions and energy flow like this, it's like embarrassing. It's not a normal state, right? It's not a normal state of perception. But like, and in my normal life, I'm not really communicating with this. I'm just communicating like, hey, what's up, you guys. But on this channel at least, right? It's my channel, right? And most people have been bored by this time. And they haven't witnessed this or whatever this is. But it's like a transmission, dude. It's like a transmission of energy. So awesome. See, it's not about words. Not about words. It's not about words. The words only help in like guiding to the place, right? I sometimes wonder what's the point of this whole channel is and everything, and it's like, why bother. But like, not many people talk about this stuff. So, I mean, why not, right? Why not talk about it? And it's certainly, from my own perspective, from 10 years ago, I did ayahuasca for the first time. 10 years. What a wild ride. It's like the gift of the Amazon jungle to humanity. Oh my God, it's flying. The gift of the Amazon jungle. Huh. Sometimes, I'd like to just move to the Amazon. It doesn't really matter, but just to be in the presence of those trees, dude, just um, the divinity of those, the gift of the Amazon. I had no idea this stuff existed. I didn't know what the fuck was going on. Oh man, so lucky, so lucky to have experienced all that stuff. So unbelievably lucky to have that happen to me. Hmm. It's funny. I'm sitting here, but in front of me, I got a picture of my kids, which I love this picture. And this is when they were little kids here, and they were dancing with their little attitudes. I'm in this great vibe right now of just like pure love, and then looking at my kids, it's just fucking awesome. Great vibes. Yeah. I guess I'm done. I don't want to. It's just like because it just feels great. It's just being here, but I'm not really saying anything, right? Who cares, man? It's my channel. I can just sit here for an hour, man, just feeling good, right? Wow. Maybe that's a more active way of meditating rather than meditating like by yourself. You go on a video and you just meditate or you talk about a certain thing. This is what happens with Kundalini too. Is like what happens with Kundalini is when you start talking about it, it starts activating, right? It starts turning on. The Kundalini just starts flowing. It just starts emanating. It's unbelievable, the radiation. It's just crazy. And so it's funny because, like I've been talking about this for so long, and like for the last 5 years, I think I've been talking 6 years, I've been talking about this purely from a meditational aspect, Shiva and Shakti, but you forget that it's like, you forget that it's the plants opened the door, right? And the shaman opened the door too, right? Unbelievable beauty. And what's funny about this is this isn't even that big an experience, like sometimes, like if I'm meditating, this happens, is like it's unbelievable what happens. Like the whole of reality disintegrates and like spirits come out and whatever. It's crazy. But generally, it's this vibe. It's this unbelievable vibe of joy and happiness, right? Of this emanation of beauty coming out of divinity. And what's amazing is that nobody even knows this exists. I mean, some of you guys knows it exists, right? But like you can't see this on the news, right? Like our world is being run by traumatized children, by traumatized inner childs. Like, it's crazy. So you wonder, like, as the world changes, what is the purpose of your life, I used to think the purpose of my life was to play guitar, and like come up with songs, but it's such it's also an expression of the ego at some state, It can also be an expression of praise and divinity too, I guess, Oh man, this is great video. This is hilarious. It's like 15 minutes of me just sitting here in silence. Holy shit, this is hilarious. Yeah, you guys. I guess I'll wrap it up because like I'll have students watching this video and thinking I'm completely nuts, but like whatever. Yeah. Dude, how did it become uncommon to become aware that God inhabits all spaces? All spaces of mind, all spaces of reality are the literal constructs of divinity. And all paths all paths lead to divinity. There are no other paths. The paths themselves are constructed of divinity. So clearly they're going to lead to divinity because that's what they're constructed of. There's a guy down at the park here where I live in Kyoto in Chile. And like at the plaza, in the town plaza, there's a little park down there. From time to time, I'm walking through there and there's a guy he's like he's probably my age. He's like in his 50s. And he comes on, he looks completely normal. And he pulls his sweater off and he starts swinging it around his head and he starts jumping up and down. Woo, woo. He starts making noises and he starts sprinting and then stops and he jumps up and down and he starts speaking in tongues, Jason Lowe, and he starts doing all this stuff. And you're like, dude, the guy's completely nuts. Or he needs a YouTube channel where he can do this and express his perception of divinity. The problem is the perception of divinity, the bandwidth of divinity is so profound that it's easy to go into states like that. Like, and like that will be defined in his case as like, he's psychotic or he's got, he's had some kind of like bipolar breakthrough or something, right? But what it really is, it's the bandwidth of consciousness, the bandwidth of divinity flowing through him is just too much for the human system manage. So yeah, so in some ways I understand that. I see that guy, I'm like, I totally know where he's coming from with that kind of craziness, you know. And I'm glad it's not me, right? I'll just keep it to like YouTube for just now. Although you wonder, you know, like there's got to be a, you know, this is the funny thing is like, you know, I'll keep it to YouTube, but the truth is that the it seems like the path of this information is to transfer it, right? It is to teach the information. That's the path. Because there's really nothing more important than this message. You don't want to be like a spiritual teacher, right? I mean, but I mean that's it just starts happening, right? Yeah, I mean that's the thing. I mean, you go through these stages of like, oh, I'm becoming a spiritual teacher, and you're like, dude, that's not me, right? It's just emanation. Wow. Okay, I'm done. I'm gonna go off because it's just getting crazy. But much love to you guys. God bless all of you. And what was the name of this thing? I keep forgetting the name of my own video. It is ego and the perception of divine technology. Oh, I missed a few things here. I had a couple of things to talk about it, but we'll leave it for another time.